Good evening. Good evening. I'd like to call to order the Village of Gurnee Planning and Zoning Board for this Wednesday, April 15th, 2020. Could we have roll call, please?
Sure. Paff.
Here.
Bow. Garrity.
Here.
Nordentoff.
Here.
Riley.
Here.
Who am I missing?
Paycheck.
Paycheck. Sorry, Josh.
Here.
And Sula.
Present. We do have a quorum. If everyone would please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Before we start, I just need to read this into the record. In accordance with the Governor's Executive Order in response to COVID-19, number 2020-07, in-person attendance requirements under the Open Meeting Act have been suspended and relaxed. Therefore, tonight, certain members of the Planning and Zoning Board will be participating remotely, and that will be reflected in the minutes. Also, the petitioner for an agenda, it's not true tonight, though, right? The agenda, there's nobody from,
We will have someone here from the informal review present, but we do not have any.
we don't have anybody from, okay.
Petitioners, no.
Okay, great. First item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes from the meeting that was held on March 18th, 2020. Does anybody have any questions, comments, or changes? If not, a motion to approve would be in order.
Motion to approve.
A motion by Mr. Paff, second by Mr. Bow. All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. The next item is a public hearing for a special use permit requested by Mr. Brian Grassa of Crestwood Development. My understanding is that they're asking for a continuance because of the COVID-19 situation, and they're asking for a continuance for to the meeting that's going to be held on May 20th, 2020. Does anybody have any objection to the request? If not, a motion to grant the request would be in order.
I'll make a motion to continue Restaurant Depot's public hearing to the Planning and Zoning Board's May 20th, 2020 meeting at 7 p.m.
We have a
Or
motion by
7:30 p.m.
Okay. We have a motion by Mr. Bow, second by Mr. Paff. All in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Motion carries. Next item on the agenda is a public hearing for a zoning map amendment for 35390 North Juniper Street. David?
Okay. Mr. Robert Baker is requesting a zoning map amendment to rezone property located at 35390 North Juniper Street from R1 Residential in unincorporated Lake County to R2 Single Family Residential in the Village of Gurnee. In order to provide consolidated and efficient services, the village has decided to invite certain unincorporated parcels contiguous to the village boundaries to voluntarily annex into the village at no cost for the annexation process. The first area the village approached was the residential area south of ground near Spruce and Juniper, as properties in this area are completely surrounded by the village. Two properties, one on Spruce and one on Jupiter, have already elected to annex into the village, and their zoning map amendment petitions were processed at the PZB on March 18. The subject lot is about 20,000 square feet, which is in line with the requirements of the village's R2 zoning, which has a minimum lot area of 15,000 square feet, a minimum lot width of 100 feet. The subject lot is completely surrounded by other residentially zoned properties. The principal building at 35390 North Juniper appears to meet the village's R2 setback requirements. However, staff cannot confirm since we have requested but did not receive a copy of their plat of survey. The Planning and Zoning Board can make a recommendation on this petition that will be forwarded to the village board for their final determination.
Okay, great. As this item is a public hearing, I would request anybody who's going to testify or ask questions to please stand and be sworn in by the village attorney. Dave, I think you have to be sworn in, right?
Yes.
Gretchen, can you swear Dave in? He's the only one here that intends to speak.
Okay. Sure. Would you please raise your right hand?
Yes.
Do you promise to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Okay, thank you. Dave, is there anything else you want to add?
Nope, this is a village-initiated process. It's very similar to the ones we did at the meeting on March 18th. We're trying to clean up some of the donut holes in the village's boundaries, so this is some of the first area that we're targeting.
Okay. Does anybody from the Planning and Zoning Board have any questions or comments? And we did like 2 or 3 of these in the last month or so. Okay, I'm going to go through the formality of opening the floor to the public. There's no one here that intends to speak. I'm going to close the floor to the public. Return back to the Planning and Zoning Board for any questions, comments. If not, a motion would be in order, please.
This is Josh. I'll make a motion. Motion to forward a favorable recommendation on the petition of Robert Baker for a zoning map amendment to rezone 35390 North Juniper Street from R1 residential to unincorporated Lake County to R2 single-family residential in the village of Gurnee.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Seconded by Mr.
Second.
I'm sorry, Laura. Edwin beat you.
No worries.
Second by Mr. Paff. Any discussion? If not, roll call, please.
Riley,
Aye.
Nordentoff,
Aye.
Bow,
Aye.
Paff,
Aye.
Garrity,
Aye.
Pashak,
Aye.
Sula.
Aye, motion carries. All right, next item on the agenda is an informal review that's been requested by Eric J. Miller Law Group on behalf of Everything Self-Storage LLC, located at 16530 West Washington and 34644 North Cemetery Road. As everybody on the Planning and Zoning Board knows, just say this for the benefit of those in attendance, I personally like this particular feature within our ordinance, give people an opportunity to come and bounce some ideas off of us and get some candid feedback. But as you all know, it's an informal review. It's not an official meeting per se. So, I mean, nothing that we say is binding in terms of any future activities that may or may not occur. At this time, I'd like to invite someone to use the microphone at the center of the room, and if you could please state your name and affiliation for the record, and let us know what you are seeking feedback on.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Board members, staff, my name is Eric Miller with Eric J. Miller Law Group, LTD. My firm is out in Rockford. We represent Everything Self-Storage, LLC. With me tonight, I have Brian Harrington, who is the owner of Everything Self-Storage, and David Urbaniak, who's a commercial broker with At Properties in their commercial division. Thank you for giving us the opportunity to come and informally present this site plan to you. As you said, Chairman Sula, we do recognize that this is a non-binding and that there will be no votes taken on this matter tonight. But based on the feedback that we get, it will let us know what our next steps are going to be with initiating the formal zoning process and getting this property under contract. We've been examining this property now for, I believe, the last roughly 9 to 10 months, and we have had discussions with the owner regarding this project. When I presented or wrote up the project description for you guys, I wanted to write it from 2 angles. First, as the attorney for the applicant, zealously representing and advocating my client's position for it, having been doing land use and municipal law, amongst other things, for the last 16 years. But also, I wanted to write it from being on your side of the table. I myself am a village trustee with the Village of Poplar Grove, so I'm used to examining these requests. And so I think it puts me in an uncommon position to be able to write it from 2 different aspects. We did have a meeting with staff back on March 10th, and we also did some research following that meeting. When we met with staff, we offered a very different site plan. It was the same L-shaped parcels that we're looking at now in this. This only works if we have both parcels. And that's what we've been negotiating with the owner on. And the initial plan that we came up with was only 2 lots. One was the retention at the westernmost point of the cemetery lot, and then our storage was going to be on the balance of the L-shaped lot. The main storage building, which is the southernmost building in our current plan, that was going to be slightly smaller. And along the balance of the cemetery parcel, we were going to have 300 parking spaces for boats and RVs. And that was going to be enclosed with a 8-foot-tall fence and a raised canopy roof. After doing the research and meeting with staff, we decided to revisit our plan, and we've now come forward with the plan that we have tonight. I'm not going to get too much into the details of the actual storage building. I'll let Mr. Harrington discuss that. But when we drafted this up, the number one thing that we wanted to keep in mind was what was going to cause the least disruption to Winchester Estates. Because as a subdivision, we want to make sure that we're a good neighbor of them, because that is really what we're surrounding. And we don't want to do something that's going to impede or be a nuisance to their enjoyment of their property. So what we've done now is consolidated our storage so that it's all on essentially the corner of the lot, the way we've redrawn the lots that we'll do in a platted re-subdivision. The outdoor storage we've now brought inside. So there will be no outdoor storage at all on this. And we think that's a real asset to the neighborhood, because all the land on the cemetery parcel that would be behind the neighborhood, on the north boundary there, that's going to be reserved for future development. We're not going to disturb that land right now. So obviously this is currently zoned E in unincorporated Lake County. One of the next steps I would do is initiate an annexation agreement and present that to the village. And in that annexation agreement, we would be looking to zone that parcel that we would carve out in the plat of subdivision as a residential parcel. Or in the alternative, have it zoned as public lands district to make it a park. It gives us some flexibility in the development of it, but the important thing is that parcel that's there, it's not going to be storage that's sandwiched between other residential parcels, because I reviewed the proposal you had for revamping your comprehensive plan back on February 19th, and I know that all those cemetery parcels are intended to be residential districts at some point, or at least that's the hope that the village would have, is to make it residential. So we want to create something that's a nice buffer for that, and so we think these Class A buildings that would be zoned either commercial or industrial, that those would give nice protection to whatever residential development goes back there to be contiguous and copacetic with what you have in Winchester Estates. So one of the other stipulations that we'll put in to the annexation agreement is that whoever develops that lot 2 that we're proposing, that is going to be their responsibility to extend Churchill Lane. Because what we have proposed here we do acknowledge it does create a landlocked parcel. So there needs to be some access to a public right-of-way. So by extending Churchill, it allows that then to move up into whatever residential subdivision eventually does get built there. So those were the parameters that we primarily worked with. The type of building that Mr. Harrington's going to describe to you, it's going to fit in very nicely in the character if you take a sampling of the commercial or industrial properties that are in that corridor between Cemetery Road and I-94. It's going to be very much like a lot of those other buildings that are there. It's not going to be rows and rows of the storage buildings like people most commonly think of when they think of self-storage. This is going to be more like an extra space or a life storage, something that's pretty much mostly self-contained inside. So there's not going to be a lot of disruption with people outside, other than the small percentage of units that we have as drive-up. But as I put in the description, any of those drive-up units or the storage for boats or RVs, there's going to be time access for those. So when people are sleeping at night, you're not going to have somebody pounding in a unit using it as a secondary business location or something. Those units will be locked out at that time, so people cannot access them. So again, the number one goal that we have with this project is wanting to be a good neighbor. And it also gives it kind of fills a hole in, I think, your development plan for that area. We've been working with other people in this community, such as Dan Winkowski from At Properties. Dave will talk a little bit more about that. So we look forward to hearing whatever feedback you have, and based on that, we will take our next steps, and we look forward to working with you guys on this. So at this time, I'll turn it over to Mr. Harrington.
For the benefit of the members that are participating by phone, there's nothing on the screen here in the chamber, but they do have a small presentation board on an easel that is basically the same as the pictures are in the materials that were distributed to us a few days ago.
Hello, my name is Brian Harrington. I'm the owner of Everything Self Storage. I've been in the industry for about 30 years. I've been a developer here in Illinois. I own and operate another self-storage here locally in Huntley, Illinois. I've been looking at this piece of property for, like Eric said, for about 10 months. I met with the owner of the property, along with Dave Urbaniak over here, and again, Dan Winkowski from At Properties. We've been seeking to look at this property it's a perfect parcel. It's right on a intersection that's got a light. The traffic area is really well. It's got a nice turn-in radius. The traffic would be entering off a cemetery road, which is keeps everything off of the main road, which is something that I'm sure you like to see. The buildings itself, the one up to on the south end, it would be a two-story, fully climate-controlled building. It does have drive-up units, and like Eric was saying, those are limited hours of operation. So from basically 6 a.m. until 9 p.m. access into the property, and at that point there, they would be customers wouldn't be able to use them at that point. On the inside, where you can drive in, we actually have drive-in units. Access could be whatever the village would allow. We do have ours over in Huntley. They allow 24-hour access, which is fine because it's non-disturbing to any customers. The materials that we'd be using here is a lot of glass. We like to show our doors. Very similar design to right down the street, about 1.5 miles or 2 miles down off of Washington. There's another red and black building. I don't believe it's in Gurnee. I think it's just next town over. But it's going to emulate that a little bit. It does not look industrial at all. It's more office-y type of a building. Again, I put the drive-in access so that customers would be enclosed when they're doing their storage needs. Storage is typically not something that you would see a lot of high traffic. You're not going to see someone always just dropping off big semis and stuff like that, waiting to get into the storage facility. It's pretty quiet. It's neighborhood friendly, really. And after we met with staff, we redesigned this within a month to add another building to the rear. It's roughly about 45,000 square feet, single story, 18 feet tall, which would accommodate any RV and boat storage inside. So it's fully enclosed. We do surround it with outside storage, so people could have access to units outside. It helps us pick up the lost areas we would receive on the inside to help with our revenue base. The office is roughly about 1,000 square feet, box sales, tapes, that type of supplies we'd be selling. We really only employ about 3 people. We do typically have a truck that we use for customers to move in and out as a free incentive for them to use a truck so they can move their stuff in and out. So, do we have any questions?
I'll start with the people remotely first. Laura, any questions?
Is there a way that the drive-up units do not have to be on the west side bordering the houses?
Well, we would like to have them to be, they're not going to be, are you kind of afraid of having that seen from the houses?
Well, I mean, we don't know who's going to be renting or what they're going to be doing in the storage units, and I guess for the safety and security of those houses, I would not want people coming 5 in the morning till 10 at night in my backyard for those houses that border it, and just wondering if those can be then moved to a different side of the building where it's not next to the residential homes?
Well, my intention with the design there is to, as you see right now, if you pass by there, there's already a buffer, a heavily treed buffer area. If it makes more sense, we can put another screen there to screen it up with another fence inside there for if you're worried about a security scenario. That doesn't pose a problem to us at all.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
It's an area when we build the building, just so that you can get comfortable with it. These are lost areas that are from the inside, from hallway systems and stuff that we can't, we lose a bunch of square footage. So putting this on the outside, I pick up all that square footage so that our revenue base can stay equal to what it should be.
So there is plans for a fence or no?
I can draw a fence on there. Currently, I was going to put a little bit more of a landscape buffer. That's what we were talking about staff for. But I can put a fence there. I'm not opposed to it.
Okay, that's all I had.
Okay, Dave?
Yeah, thank you. I just want to echo some additional concerns from my side as well about the activity level that's just going to be on that west side of the property. And, Laura touched on this, on the security side of it, but from my standpoint, it's just activity from idling vehicles to overhead doors going up and down and slamming shut and locks and, just the noise of activity of being back there as early as, according to our packet, 5 a.m. to 10 p.m., headlights, I just don't know that's something that I care for very much. I just don't think that's a very pleasant sort of thing to have immediately behind these yards. And I know you have an economic model you have to try to meet, whatever, and I'm not, going to debate that side of it, but I'm just sharing my thoughts that I have some concerns about just the overall activity level that's going to occur along that entire, according to the model drawings that we have here, there's quite a few garage door openings that run along the entire western border there between both of those buildings. And so, there's a lot of units. So I understand there's economics to it, but I just think you need to know what my concerns are on it. Number two, I just want to touch on again, were you planning on running a truck rental component out of this, like a U-Haul type operation as well, or not?
No, we're only putting in a truck there for our customers to use to help them move in to the site. It's our own truck. It's not a rental.
Okay. That's the only other question I had at the moment. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Dave. Josh?
Yeah, thanks for coming. Josh Pasock here. I just want to echo what Dave and Laura said about the west side as well. The activity level could be high. The hours are very, very long, right? 5 a.m. to 10 p.m. seems in some ways excessive. When we have these parcels in our community that neighbor or butt up against residential, we typically don't see that early of a start time and that late of an end time. So I will echo those concerns, but not belabor. But I'd also like to give you some positive feedback. I like what you said about Lot 2 and whoever takes on Lot 2 being responsible for extending Churchill. I think that's great because we need that buffer. So I'd like to commend that and give you some positive feedback there. Also, these are just my thoughts, but I would like to encourage whatever you do with this parcel to keep that very heavy buffer between the residential area. You just mentioned it, and I'm sitting here looking at my screen, which is a Google map image of a heavy tree line between that parcel and the residential, and I'd just like to encourage you to not disturb that, because I think that would be a really nice feature for whatever we do with Lot 1 and Lot 2, but to keep that tree line. The question that I have is I'm looking at what was in the package, and I'm just curious about the parking and just trying to better understand where on that gray area would people park? Is there going to be enough parking, or can maybe you walk us through the thinking there? I mean, I know it's not going to be a heavy trafficked area with a large parking need because it's self-storage. I get it. I'm just trying to get a better feel for what's going to happen with the cars and where they're going to go.
Sure. Typically, the parking up into the gray area, there's roughly going to be probably 2 handicaps and probably another 8 to 10 spaces for parking for customers to come in to the office. We typically only get 1 or 2 customers in at a time. It's not something that they're knocking down the doors on. With today's technology, a lot of our customers are actually they can rent units online. And then we'll also have a kiosk where they can pick up their lock. Will be available for them to pick up their lock to go ahead and get into their unit. So that's where it would be in the front area, on the south end, in front of the building for parking, just right up in front of it. And then, like I said, along the sides, there's no additional parking spaces I'm going to have. It's just kind of a drive completely around. There's three locations. Each building you can drive. It's designed so that a fire truck can get through all the way completely 360 degrees around the building. And that's done intentional. And then to bring back your comment, yes, I had no intention of disturbing that buffer zone. Just I was going to increase a little bit more green to that area, but we can do both. We can do a little bit more trees and some and a fencing element there to cut down. You're not going to hear the noise, and I'm open to if you feel 5 a.m.'s too early, we could do 6 a.m.'s typical, and then we can shut things down at 8 o'clock at night for drive-ups. which we can control on our aspect, because those outside units, we're going to try to have them in there's a new technology that you can open up your units now through Bluetooth. So in those units specifically, we don't have to have a lock. We can do it electronically. So we can shut those things off at certain hours. So we're open to that as well.
Tim?
No, I'm looking again at this is Josh Pasak again.
Oh, I'm sorry, Josh.
Can I still talk?
Yes, go ahead.
Just like to close out, Jim, thank you. I do see now where there's parking in front, and the feedback to me is that that's a great place for it, because we don't want to encourage, the western side parking or behind on the northern side. So the feedback there is great. Also positive feedback would be that this is self-contained units to sort of discourage a lot of outdoor activity next to this residential area. So, thank you for coming in and sharing this with us.
Okay, Tim?
Well, good evening, everyone. Can you hear me, Chairman?
Yes.
Okay. So I'm going to tag along with what everybody else said about the western facing against the neighbors. I think my main concern, too, is that it looked like, for the most part, there's going to be some self-contained, or it's going to be self-contained units. My concern would be that when we think of self-storage, we often think of people, neighbors storing their wares in a self-storage unit. My professional experience in working with direct store delivery drivers, they often use units like this to store inventory, point-of-sale material. Perhaps a plumber's going to have his storage area there, so that often attracts, in my experience, we'll see 26-foot box trucks that might be driving up and to on that western side, disturbing the neighbors. My concern is it appropriate to have that access on the western front? I think that, even if we did look at this as something that, we were okay with, I think that, once this goes before the village board, you can have neighbors coming out and protesting. I know I would. I wouldn't want to have, that sort of access right up against my backyard. Again, I'm not an architect. I don't have the answers to it, but any way we can buffer as much activity as possible so it's away from the neighbors, vehicles, entry, people, the better. That's my only feedback that I have. Thank you, guys.
Okay, thank you. Edwin?
Okay, yeah, I have the same sentiments. One thing I would have liked to seen on the drawing was some measurements. I have no idea how far it is from that building to the property line of the houses. Do you have any clue?
I do, but I do. I can grab it.
Oh, that's I would like to know, but
You're talking about to the side of the house?
just to their property lines. You have the asphalt there and then the green space, and I have no idea how far that is from.
So what's the building setback is what he's asking?
Right, what's the building setback from the property line?
Well, it's roughly going to be from the west side is going to be about 60 to 65 feet.
To the property line? Oh,
It's
okay.
quite a bit.
The first thing I was going to say is although you're right that this does match some buildings further down towards the tollway, to me personally, this isn't really a great use for this piece of property. I would have rather seen something like the complex catty corner to it, and I do know some people in the neighborhood, and they felt the same way. It is a beautiful building, and you're right, like the one down on Washington in front of the college is a nice-looking building. Personally, I just don't think it fits this corner, And like everybody else has stated, I would rather not see all that traffic on the west side of the building. But I guess that's my only comment. I do like the fact that, again, you left that residential in back, because that was one of our concerns with another project. And so I think you tried really hard to make this work on this piece of property. Appreciate it.
Brian?
I'm just going to echo what everybody else has said. And my concerns are the westerly access, and particularly the hours of operation. I mean, 5 o'clock in the morning, I mean, Tim referenced it, you know, there's some contractor that's using that as a storage area to, you know, store materials and things like that. Of course, they're going to be out there at 5 o'clock in the morning. I don't know that if I'm a resident there, that I want to hear a truck pull up and a bunch of like pipes clanking around and thrown into the back of a pickup truck at, you know, 5 or 6 o'clock in the morning. Those are my comments.
My comments are, first, in terms of lots 2 and 3, I wholeheartedly support the concept of punching out the subdivision to head further west. One of the key concerns I have is the zoning request. To request either an I-1 or C3 seems pretty intense to me and beyond what we've envisioned in the current comprehensive plan and what's potentially proposed in the upcoming revision of to the comprehensive plan. I mean, I view this corner as being, the zoning for this corner being more of a community-friendly commercial development as opposed to a warehousing operation, which is really what when you cut through it, self-storage is warehousing. And I think the building is very, very attractive, don't get me wrong, and I think it would look really great a half a mile or a mile to the east. I think it would fit nicely in the tri-state industrial type complex, but a similar proposal came to us not too long ago to put self-storage on this corner, and it didn't get a real warm and cuddly response. And I applaud the architectural creativity, but I'm very concerned about the underlying zoning, because once that zoning is there, there's nothing to say that it can't become something else that is also allowed by the list of what's envisioned in I-1 or C3. So those are my key concerns.
Chairman Sula, if I could just maybe touch on those concerns a little bit. The reason we proposed C3 and I-1 is that is what, according to your current zoning code, has a permitted use for self-storage. One of the things we could examine in the annexation agreement would be, instead of creating such an expansive, I guess, view of the zoning for that and a heavy use for that lot, perhaps we could do maybe we could do something where we amend the code to allow maybe a special use for self-storage in a lighter commercial district. We did, I know the prior proposal that was brought to you had a retail aspect to it that was part of the frontage on Washington. I'm going to have Dave Urbaniak address that real quick. So just so you thought where our mind frame was when we drafted this description and created this project, we looked at what was the permitted uses right now.
And I understand that, and I applaud the creativity of going down another approach, but it still won't get me over the hurdle of having a self-storage warehousing type operation on that corner. In my mind, it just doesn't fit there. Okay. Anybody else want to add anything? If somebody remotely does, please just identify yourself first so we know who you are.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Board. As has already been said, my name is David Urbaniak, and I'm a commercial real estate broker with Ad Properties. The reason I'm here, I don't know that this is a natural segue, but I'll do my best and I'll only take a minute. But I've worked with Dan Witkowski, who some of you know perhaps for a number of years. We've collaborated on a lot of things. He was the driving force. He introduced us to the owner, and he's part actually of the equity team that would be participating in the development and ownership of the property. The only thing I can add here at this point is as a commercial broker. You probably know retail right now is kind of a depressed category within commercial or real estate, generally speaking, and nationally as a whole. That's due to a lot of reasons, including online sales as opposed to the old brick and mortar. And we don't really know what's going to be coming out of the current crisis. But what we do know, and what has been a constant over the last few years, and it is projected for 2020 and 2021, and we can provide that background information, is how strong a need and a future there is for self-storage. It's one of the few areas that is projected to continue to grow. And in this particular development, you're looking at a building, two buildings actually, a project total that's going to be well in excess of $10 million to get up and running. And once it's assessed at a certificate of occupancy, it's going to be assessed and is going to be worth every dime of that 10 million plus. Once it's fully stabilized, which is going to take a period of anywhere from 2.5 to 3.5 additional years, that property value is conservatively going to be worth $18.5 million, possibly more, depending on how it's valuated and what the future holds. But that's predicated on my last 4 years of working with Brian and Eric in this category as a whole. So what that means is obvious. I won't spend a lot of time, but that's a lot of nice revenue coming in that's going to be there for every taxing body that's going to be involved through the municipality and through the county. And unlike a lot of retail businesses that come and go, right? You don't have to go very far to see dark areas even before the Corona-19 crisis hit. Self-storage is one of those things that continues on. Banks love to finance them because they don't default, and they are cash machines that provide a very, very stable element to the community in which they're built. So that's my sales job. That's my sales thing for you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments from members of the Planning and Zoning Board?
No.
Jim, this is Josh.
Yes.
I do appreciate the comments you just made regarding the zoning of this plot, and I'm just curious, what are the options if it's not, an industrial plot or commercial heavy use? What would be the options? Is it really would it be a special use for self-storage?
I'll let David answer that.
We could do it a couple different ways. We could do it either through an annexation agreement. We may be able to adjust the use list. Very similar, a little bit farther west from this property, we've got the Papo's Car Wash. Through that annexation agreement, we are proposing to decrease the number of allowed, permitted, or special uses that would be allowed on that site. So along those same lines, we could tweak the use list to add self-storage as a special use and then add that into this site. So we can do that through an annexation agreement, which has a 20-year life, or we could do it through a PUD and run through a PUD process for the site as well. Either of those options would allow us to amend that use list and give it an underlying zoning that would be a little lighter in nature than what we've got right now. I believe the southwest corner is C2 and the southeast corner is C2 PUD. So it's very similar to those. There actually is a piece of industrial that is across Cemetery Road existing right now, and I believe that's an I-1 or an I-2 designation on that parcel as well. So it's, the industrial is not so far away, it's basically across Cemetery Road, but there are some options that we could do to amend those use lists and get it into a little bit of a lighter commercial district if we chose to do that.
Yeah, so Josh Pasak again. Just to echo what Jim Sula was saying is I would agree with the comments he made to the petitioner regarding, or in this case, this informal review, rather, sorry. I would echo what Jim said, is that industrial use seems a bit extreme. And even the commercial 2, right, is more consistent, lighter use, and it provides that longevity and that, restricted use. I mean, with this proposal, it sounds like this, the building will be there for more than 20 years, but just more consistent with our land use and zonings, that C2 would sound, it sounds to me, David, Jim, like that would be more consistent with the area. And I'd just like to echo that to the folks in the room.
Okay, thanks, Josh.
This is Tim. Can I
Yes.
give a comment?
Yes, Tim?
So, just based on some of the testimony I heard from the different agents there in the room, I would just say, too, that we talked about the increased value of the real estate. I do worry about, for the homeowners, what is the decrease in their property value from having, a self-storage unit right at their back door with entry that's going in and out on the west side. That being said, and I do say that I support both Josh and the chairman, Sula's thought process here. I think the project could be more palatable, again, if I didn't have to, or we didn't have to worry about vehicles idling, coming in at all hours, and just being, having that western front, I think, or that western entry area. If that's eliminated, this is something that's, more that I could take a look at and possibly get behind. But I think that whole western end is just a non-starter for me. And again, my concern is the homeowner access to the west. That's it. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Tim. Anything else? Yeah, Dave just put a graphic up on the screen here. Dave, do you want to walk us through it?
Sure. So just talking about adjacent zoning, the parcels in question is this one with the Washington Street frontage, as well as this one, which wraps around to the north. So as I indicated, that the two parcels at the southeast and southwest quadrants of the intersection of Cemetery and Washington both have a C2 PUD designation. I know that the Market Square project on the southeast has a modified use list that was done as part of the annexation and PUD agreement. The southwest quadrant was before my time, so it's been a while since I've looked at that PUD, but most likely there was something in there as well. C1 on the northeast quadrant, and then like I said, we've got an element of I2 and public, which is our bulk water storage for the village of Gurnee, so it's a heavy public use on that site as well.
And it's very passive.
It is very passive, but it is a large concrete tank that sits on that site. It's pretty to me, but wouldn't be pretty to most people.
Is it above ground?
It's about 10 feet above ground and about 12, 15 feet underground.
Okay.
So that's
It
our
looks like a building.
main point of water where it comes into the village, and then we've got a 3 million gallon storage tank there that is our buffer for the village as well.
Oh, I didn't realize it was that large.
Yeah, it's the biggest one we have in town.
Wow. Didn't know.
So just to give you a little context
Thanks.
for the zoning out there.
Any other comments? Brian Bow is shaking his head no. Edwin's shaking his head no. Anybody remote?
None for me, Jim.
Okay,
No.
For
Oh,
me.
good for my end, Jim.
okay. All right, well, hope what we had to say helped you. Next item on the agenda is meeting on the calendar for May 6th. I assume there's some public hearings for that. I understand we have public hearings scheduled through the first meeting in June, right?
Yes.
Okay. So, looks like we have 2 meetings for sure in May, and then probably the first one in June as well, just to keep in the back of your minds. I'm going to open the floor to public comment. There's nobody here expressing a desire to comment. A motion to adjourn would be in order?
So moved.
By Mr. Biden.
Second by Josh.
Did you get all that, Dave?
Well, the first was by Mr. Bao, so we'll take the second by Josh. All in favor, say aye.
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 Motion carries. Okay, be well, be safe, everyone. Talk to you soon.
You too.